Greetings, sacred beings, sacred souls. Welcome to Sacred HERstory podcast. I am your host, Jennifer Natasia, and today for Sacred HERstory guest speaker, we have Namrata, who is a certified yoga teacher and founder of Tranquil Lotus Yoga. Um, Her belief or the belief for Lotus Yoga is yoga belongs to your actual life, not just a studio mat. After discovering the power of micro yoga sessions during one of the hardest seasons of her life in 2020, she stopped waiting for the perfect conditions to practice and started meeting herself exactly where she was. And now she helped busy people weave movement, breath, and stillness into the pockets of their everyday life, which I love. So amazing. And welcome, Namrata, to Sacred Her Story podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Wow. I'm reading this and I love how, you found this this space of, you don't have to be perfect or wait for this perfect condition
Mhm.
and found this place to just breathe. I feel like currently I'm struggling with that. So share what was going on in 2020 and what was going on in your life that made you look into yoga. Was this something that you've been introduced to all your life, or how was that for you?
So, yoga is something that was like introduced to me as a very young age, but it wasn't just the asana practice. It was a lot of the philosophy. And asana and like what we're taught in the Western world comes from philosophy. Like the asana practice and the breathwork practice is not just like doesn't come just out of thin air. It's based off the philosophy. So growing up, my mom would tell me like all these stories about the philosophy, and it was like interwoven into for example, I'll tell you like one story which I love that she told me. So she would tell me there's like, there were these two birds, they were best friends, they would play together, they would like, roam around, fly together, and just explore the city. And so these two birds, they had like different personalities. So what would happen is whenever this bird was like hungry, he or she would just like, go and look for food and like, just go crazy and just find the certain kinds of foods that they would like. And so the bird, it would find bitter foods and like sweet foods, and like it showed all these facial expressions and it was very expressive. This other bird would like do the same thing, but it was very like she wouldn't say grounded. I don't remember the exact word, but she'd be like, the bird would try the foods and it would just be like very calm in trying all these foods. And so she basically related that to like when you're meditating, but she didn't say like these are just words that I like come up with. Like she didn't say meditating, but she was saying like you have these two personalities. Like you don't have this one personality where you're always like showing emotions and one personality where you're always calm, and that's where meditation is. It meets you where you are. So at one point you can show your emotions and you can be where you are, and at another point like you can be calm and grounded. And so like little things like that, she would just tell me like throughout my years. And that's something that I always like cherish. And I have a son now, and I hear her like telling all these stories to him, and I'm like, oh my God, he's learning yoga. Like not in the traditional sense, but like, in the more of the sense of like understanding like toddler wise. So growing up, it was always part of my culture, the way I lived. Even like when it comes to like breath work, when we're praying, we're kind of like, because I'm a Hindu, I'm a practicing Hindu. So at the temple, they would talk about philosophy. They would talk about things that we're learning right now in the Western world, like here and now. So it's all been there ever since I was younger. So like the traditional like asana, pranayama practice, like teaching a typical class was when I started in like 2017. I was practicing at a yoga studio, and they had a teacher training. And so I decided to join it. And, I was 200 hours certified. And I was 200 hours certified for about like 3 years. And then the pandemic hit. So that was when my yoga practice like changed completely. I couldn't really go to the yoga studio. I had some health concerns, so I didn't like really want to go practice at the yoga studio because, COVID, I don't know how it's going to affect me. I was trying to get pregnant at the time too. So that was like a big factor. And so during that time, I would practice at home and I tried doing like the whole hour practice at the studio and I was just like it felt like clunky and it didn't feel right. So what I ended up doing like one day I'm like, what if I like break up my practice into like 5 to 10 minutes? And it's not just like one 5 to 10 minute practice. It's like multiple throughout the day. And it wasn't like one particular practice. It was like an asana practice. Maybe I do like 5 minutes of a short asana flow or like a pranayama flow, or maybe just like meditation and then asana. So I was like playing around with how I could fit it in my life. And then at that time, I got like 300 hours certified as well. So I learned a lot more of the practices. 200 hour, it's like you're just scratching the surface of what yoga is and what you're learning. And the 300 hour, you go a little bit deeper. And like currently, I'm training to be a yoga therapist. So with yoga therapy, you learn how to work with people who have different, like, I don't want to say issues, but like they're suffering through certain things, like anxiety, depression, because you can go to a yoga studio specifically for anxiety and depression and do an hour practice and you may feel great after, but then it's probably not going to help you with your anxiety or depression because there's so much more to that. There's like things that go out throughout the day that trigger your anxiety, or when you're going through depression, you have certain things that trigger your episodes. So my journey with yoga has been like all over the place, but I have literally practiced like since I was very young, pretty much.
I love it. You're inspiring me. I've been a wannabe yoga practitioner for over 10 years and never got my yoga certification. But I love how you broke it down in these little into pieces of 5 to 10 minutes. I go, gosh, what a stretch is it to find an hour in your busy schedule to fit this in? And here you're like, I want to see how it works for 5, 10 minutes and break it down so it's easier. And I was thinking when you were sharing how your mom tells your baby, your son, these, these teachings. And
Mhm.
first thing that came to mind is storytelling. This is
Hmm.
how things are passed on into these, metaphors and these fables, to keep it, so that we can remember it easier. Like how you remembered, yeah, these two birds, this is the story my mom shared when it's like, oh, well, these two people, you probably won't remember. You're like, it's like, yeah, these
Yeah.
two birds with these two personalities. One was picky, the other one wasn't, and would meditate like while they're eating, so it's like the way we remember it is it's powerful through storytelling,
Hmm.
you know. Um, and so thank you for sharing such a beautiful introduction of how yoga was implemented in your life and your belief, how it's Hindu, I think it's so incredible, with the culture and the mix and it's just so beautiful. But you were sharing too, in 2020, you were going through some health stuff, or you were talking about you were trying to get pregnant. How
Hmm.
was that for you?
So that was incredibly hard, for because we were isolated. We had like the social distancing, and we had like travel restrictions. And for me, like my yoga practice was such a big part of my life. So that was like a piece of me that was like taken, where I'm like, okay, that was my community too, all
Mhm.
my friends and everything. So it was incredibly hard. So I got tested because my husband and I were trying for like years. And we tried, like, we got tested in March. Was it March? No, February of 2020. And as you know, the next month, that's when like
The
everything
world
had to
shut
be
down.
held. Yeah, it's like everything was shut down. Everything was pushed back. And so I went to the doctor and they're like, you need to do a laparoscopy. And so I had my laparoscopy scheduled for like April or May and had to be pushed back for like June. So we went through the whole process of like, all right, we have to wait, and then I had to wait like 3 months after the laparoscopy to get pregnant. And so I got pregnant But what happened was in December of 2020 is when I had a pregnancy loss, and I was like 14 weeks pregnant. So it was an insane journey of like just trying to get pregnant. And then, once you get pregnant, you're like, okay, I'm 14 weeks. And usually they say like after the first trimester is like the safe, you're safe. And I felt like a sigh of relief, but then it's like this happened. So that was hard in 2020. I mean, I got pregnant in like 2021, and that was like that's my current son right now, but getting there was so hard, even going through that process of healing, or even because even in 2021, some restrictions were lifted, but I still wanted to be careful because, when you're getting pregnant, even you're trying to get pregnant, you have to be careful, and my mindset at least, and I was high risk. So it's like, I'm like, wait, I could get pregnant. And, it's like, I want to go on a trip, but what if I get pregnant? Like, what if this happens? What if that happens? And the one thing that I think I learned also from like me being pregnant 2 times is I let go of the need of needing to be pregnant like right then and there. And it's so hard when you've been trying for so long. But the first time I got pregnant, I was like, that's when I started my training for my yoga teacher or yoga therapy training. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go through this. I want to like do something for myself instead of always thinking that I have to get pregnant like this month. And once I let go of the need to be pregnant, I got pregnant immediately. And then the second time that happened, what was the reason? Oh yeah, so I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to live my life, and I'm just going to like, you know, go day by day, live in the present moment. If I want to take a trip, I'll take a trip. And then I started my business, my Tranquil Lotus Yoga business, because I'm like, let me try this. Let me just wait and see what happens. And I was like, you know what? Whenever it happens, it's going to be the most amazing, like beautiful thing. And so like literally 2 weeks after, I filled out the paperwork to start my business, it was like I was pregnant again, So it's interesting how people say that like you shouldn't always like ruminate on it and like think about, which is hard to say. And it's more of a learned thing. It's not just like one day I was like, oh yeah, I have to stop thinking about it. It took like time and like me just realizing I need to bring joy into my life to like to help me with this pregnancy, help me getting pregnant. It's something that also I've learned just like wanting things, like wanting certain things. Like if you want to, say, for example, if you want to like, I'm one of my goals this year is I want to like, I would love to do some sort of big like yoga event, just like teaching micro yoga. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm like networking, doing all this stuff. And I'm like, you know what? Instead of thinking about the stress of, I want it to happen this year, just keep doing your stuff. This is the stuff that brings you joy, and it will happen eventually.
I love this. So tell us more about micro yoga. I mean, you shared a lot, how you created like this flow, this
Mhm.
beautiful flow. Here you're trying to get pregnant, and
Mhm.
finally, when you just let it go, it happens.
Mhm.
And that's how it seems to work with so many things, right? The more
Yeah.
pressure we put on ourselves, the least likely it's going to happen. And listening to you, I'm like, oh, just breathe. Just, 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 just go with what resonates, right? Just
Yeah.
flow, right? And
Hmm.
whatever that looks like for you. And I'm just like, But you keep saying micro yoga.
Yeah.
Um, Can you share more about micro yoga?
Yes. This is in this Western society, we think that our yoga is 1 hour and then we're done, and it's like check mark our list. We're like, okay, we're done. That's like off our to-do list. But yoga is so much more than that. Yoga is like incorporated throughout your day. So yes, you can do like, an hour asana practice. I'm not saying like that's not considered yoga. That is yoga. But for some people, they don't have the time to do it. And for some people, they do it mostly for fitness, but like for me, I like embodying yoga. I like doing it throughout the day. So, I may not even like step on my mat, it may just be me noticing like every hour I take a break and I do like chair yoga where I'm just doing like stretches. I'm doing like neck circles. And then it may be at certain points where I'm like, okay, I'm feeling a little bit of agitation when I'm talking to a certain coworker. Let me just take a step back. Let me revisit this conversation and we can like come back and talk about the conversation. We can talk about it. So it's more of like, it's a lot of yourself. Like you're learning about yourself. You're learning about what makes you tick. You're learning about how to respond instead of that like quick spitfire reaction. So it's a lot, it's very different. And there's like not specific, like, okay, here, do this like 10-minute, alternate nostril breathing, and you are going to like not react. It's learning about yourself and just noticing more about yourself. And in an hour practice, like I said, I love doing like an hour practice once in a while. I don't have time for that now. And so for this kind of micro yoga, I want it to be for people who like don't have the time to go to the studio, but they're curious about yoga and but they also want it to be more learning about themselves instead of someone just like saying, okay, do downward dog, child's pose, and telling them what poses to go into.
Mm, this is so delicious. Like I'm just like I'm hearing everything and I'm like, ooh, embodying. That I kind of got stuck like just being yourself, just learning about yourself, learning
Mhm.
what your body's feeling. And when you said, sometimes I don't even step on the mat.
Yeah.
And I go, wait, that's what you're supposed to do. This is yoga, right? And, talking about Western philosophy, that check off mark. Okay, I did
Mhm.
an hour. Okay, I'm ready to go. My day is ready. But you're like, no, let's just slow it down. Bring the awareness of what's actually happening to us in the moment.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
simple thing of doing the neck curls, like you said, I go, oh, that's yoga. That that moment of just listening to the body. This is what I'm hearing,
Yes,
and
yes, yeah.
the chair yoga, and I'm like, ooh, chair yoga. Can you give some examples of that?
Yeah,
Because
I
like,
mean,
ooh,
so chair yoga can be I think the main reason why it was started for people who are not able to, get on and like move up and down on the mat so to make it more accessible. So you will be doing like warrior ones, but you will do it with the support of a chair. So you are doing like the asana postures, but you're just sitting down and doing you're lifted. So um like I don't know how many of your listeners do yoga, but for example, there is a pose called like figure four. So basically, you have your 2 feet on the ground, and then one foot is like over your knee, and then you kind of just gently guide your knee that's bent like closer to the mat. So instead of doing that, that's basically like, sitting down on the chair and having like the having your foot like over your knee and just gently like pushing down on your knees. So it's more of like support. You need that support for people who, chair yoga is great for like older people too, who can't like, who aren't just mobile, they can go up and down on the mat. And, at work, when you're working, I do a lot of chair yoga during work. So I do like maybe 3 5-minute sessions per day. And it's just like, I'll do like upper body in the morning or lower body and then full body. And it's just, just noticing how my body feels. So, I don't have time to like put down my mat and like get warmed up and get ready. It's just like quick. And that's what I love. So that's one like micro yoga thing. Another micro yoga thing is there's something called mudras. So mudras are if you like touch your fingers, you feel like there's so much sensation there. And so like for example, this is the most common mudra. This is Yana mudra. And this is, you've probably seen it in like people doing meditations or even like putting all your fingers together. And also like when you're doing the namaste and like putting your thumb knuckles like against your chest, that's a mudra too. So you're like and if you do that for like are you noticing like the sensations you're feeling? So I don't know the science behind it. I think it's still being studied, but it's so powerful. They're called like finger locks. So that's another thing. I'll do different mudras throughout the day, and it's just like closing my eyes, maybe putting my hands on my heart. And it's like little things like I mentioned before, it's not asana based because asana is just a small portion of yoga. And it's also like when I was telling you about when you're talking to a coworker that just like pisses you off and you're just noticing, oh, like my body's tightening. Like you notice that you're about to react, so you step back from that situation. And that's something that I've been incorporating. Even with with family members, it's like, okay, you're saying like, I'm sure a lot of people like will know that will have maybe have this experience like when you're talking to I know for me like my mom like she loves nagging me on how just certain things and I'm like it's we have this really complicated relationship where it's like she has one way that she thinks and I have one way. And instead of me just like yelling and reacting, I'm like, okay, well, why do you think like that? Like I can have a more clear like conversation. And I think one thing about like micro yoga that people don't really know is it can help your communication a lot more. You take a step back and you breathe and you don't react to like your partner or your mom or a coworker or like just someone that you want to like have a nice conversation with.
I could have definitely used this a couple weeks ago when I went off on a student. Excuse me. I love this. I love what you're sharing. And I go, for those of my listeners who do not do yoga, they'll probably be more likely to do yoga now because here you're like micro yoga and just the simple awareness, and this is so important with like the nervous system,
Hmm.
because it takes an amount of awareness of like what is going on in our body, what are we feeling, and everything that you shared right now is slowing down and bringing this awareness, not that pushing for the hour or putting the
Yes.
mat down, because this is what yoga is, that probably many of us Westerners think this is yoga. I mean, I'm guilty of it. You
Yeah, yeah.
like thinking, oh, I need to get this mat out again, and I just want to just stretch right now because my body's feeling it. And
Hmm.
you're like, no, do it. It's listening to your body. Do you need that stretch? Do you need to do neck circles? So I think this is very powerful
Hmm.
and something that is um that we can sustain. It's sustainable. It's like, oh no, you don't need to do an hour, do 5 minutes, do 10 minutes
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
So yeah, I no, it sounded like you wanted to say something. What did you want to?
Oh no. Well, I mean, like I said, like I don't have I feel like whenever I speak to this, like everyone's always like they just I have this pushback of oh no but I've had great like results in the yoga studio. I feel so much better at the yoga studio and I'm not saying that you're not going to like not have results from the yoga studio. I just think that it's a curated experience. A lot of people purely go there for fitness to get flexible and yes like maybe you are noticing you're breathing better during that yoga class. What about when you're like driving through traffic and like you feel that uncomfortableness, it's a different situation. So I feel like for me, like I want people to apply it to like real world, not just doing a flow. So not just doing a flow, like doing it in certain situations. And like I said, it's like it's on the practitioner to like implement this because, as like I do one-on-one sessions and like as a yoga therapist in training, we're taught that we could tell our client, do this, do that, do this, and then, but we're not going to be there to like baby them and like push them. And that's like another reason why I like yoga therapy and like why I wanted to get more into it and, just have my studies more in that than an actual like yoga teacher. Because I am a certified yoga teacher. I was teaching like group classes. And I think like I loved doing it when I did, but now I'm seeing feel more of a passion to do one-on-one. And so like the one thing I like about yoga therapy is you can pick and choose. Like, say if you have 5 to 10 minutes for like, you're like, okay, I want 5 to 10 minute, like, some sort of like yoga practice throughout the day, and we can discuss that. And I'll talk about, okay, what's their history? What's their medical history? And then we talk about, like, are they sitting down for like 8 hours a day? We talk about their lifestyle. And so it's more of like learning the background of a student and how to help them incorporate this, in their everyday life. And so the one thing about yoga therapy is we want to like be with this client short term. So it's not just like, all right, you're going to be seeing me for like 2 years. Basically, we want to teach them these practices that to do. And throughout my sessions, we don't just do one practice and we're done. We see how the practice feels in your body. If you're like, I don't like that, then we'll do something else. And so I like how like personalized, I can have someone have their practices to be. But I just wanted to say like, about yoga therapy and why I like it and why I think it's like I think a lot more people should focus on, the short sessions instead of the longer sessions, especially if they don't have time. Like don't stress yourself out if you don't have time to go to the studio because then it's like you're driving there. You're like you're going there for an hour or maybe 90 minutes and then you're coming back and at times it's like, oh my God, I need to carve off 2 hours of my time. And I've talked to clients where they're like, after the class, I feel more grounded. But then when I'm like in the car and I'm about to go into my house, I don't want to go in my house because I love this like blissful feeling. So we want to have that feeling, the more grounded feeling throughout the day instead of just like after your yoga practice.
I love this. I because you're more talking about the embodying of it
Hmm.
and putting it to not just okay, when I'm on the mat, I'm practicing yoga, because yoga is more than that, right? Yoga
Yeah.
is union.
Hmm.
And and for me, I when I think of that, because I've heard it often. Like I said, I'm a wannabe yogi instructor or practitioner, but never get that far. But when I think of union, it's like union with myself too, mind,
Hmm.
body, spirit, and what way to do that is to slow down. And this is where you're like really tapping in versus, okay, if you can't make the time, that doesn't need to be the excuse not to practice it,
Hmm.
but to just say, okay, let me shorten it up and do what I can, because at the end of the day, we can use it throughout the day,
Yeah.
and to be just more considerate and aware individuals, which is what we really need nowadays. We're so on the edge of our seats, like, oh my God, did you hear where it's like,
Yep.
probably, well, not probably, a lot of those people up top who are trying to run things, they need to add some yoga in their life.
Do you know what? It's so interesting because there's so much cosplaying of spirituality and just like yoga in general. There are, how do I say this? I don't know if I call them influencers, but influencers, maybe even like politicians. I don't know if politicians and so where they have this concept of yoga and they want to like they just cosplay of, oh, this is what yoga is, and they
Yeah.
talk about it, but then like though I think the one core thing to remember is when you see a spiritual influencer or someone, when they're talking about someone, just there's a concept called ahimsa in yoga, and that's called about being just kind, like be kind, like literally the number one cardinal rule we learn in like kindergarten, you know? And that's the one thing you have to keep in mind when you're like, even when you're at the studio, when you're like seeing someone online. Is this harmful? Is this rhetoric harmful to anyone else? Like anyone else. And so I know from my personal experience, from pe things I have seen, people who consider themselves yoga teachers teach at the studio, and they're very they speak this kind of rhetoric where it's like harmful towards other people,
Mm.
other living beings. And that's, I think, I know we're like going
No,
off topic,
no,
but like
let's
I
talk
think
about it. Yeah,
yeah,
let's.
it's so important to remember like, red flags to look for. If they're sitting here and they're gossiping about other people, if they are just speaking harm, like, oh, certain people should not even like exist in our world because they think differently, like they are not embodying yoga. They like you're teaching a yoga practice, and yoga is more than just doing the asana. So I think that's I know we I
No,
don't even
no,
know how we got to this.
this is key stuff. Don't apologize.
Yeah.
This is
So I
what's
mean
needed.
it's
Like,
something that and that's like that's the one thing I think I'm trying to remember too, because I used to be such a people pleaser. I used to be, I don't want to like rock the boat, and I never used to say anything. And now I kind of speak out about the patterns that I've seen in yoga, maybe at the studios, maybe in like the yoga community in general. And I'm not talking about like the yoga community as a whole, but like certain things I've seen. And I've gotten like so much pushback because, as yoga, you're not supposed to be judgmental, and like they kind of do that spiritual bypassing, and it's and
mhm.
I feel like sometimes people like when it comes to yoga, they kind of see like, oh, they're the mean girls there, or it seems very like posh. And on top of that, like yoga studios are expensive. It seems like something so exclusive, and that's another thing. I don't want yoga to be exclusive. We can all practice yoga. You don't have to drive like 30 minutes to go to a studio. You could do it at home.
Mhm. I love what you're sharing because yeah, it is. You see a lot of it is posh, and then it's like $60 for a class, depending
Yeah,
on where you live. Like here in
yeah.
California, you see it, and I go, I don't want to pay that much just for a class. And
Hmm.
like there was something you said earlier about how like, some students are like, well, I like going to the studio. Yeah, because the energy, right?
Yeah,
When
yeah.
you have all that energy and everyone's
Mhm.
like flowing and seem appear happy, then yeah, there's this energy being exchanged through it all.
Exactly. Yeah.
But like with everything you're saying, energetically, or not energetically, but what people say, people are going to talk. What is accurate, I think it's we like the key thing, what you were saying is listen and bring awareness. What are they doing? If they're talking about someone else, is that really a practice of yoga, of what
Hmm.
yoga actually teach? And the key thing is be kind. And
Yeah.
it's not this whole, oh, let me just take as much money as you can and have you charge $5,000 for you to get your yoga
I
certification.
know.
And
It's expensive, and it's like I see the two sides of it. It's a business and they have to make money, but then it's like on that side, I think the ethics and the the spiritual teachings of yoga kind of just gets like watered down because it's a business. And so I understand like it's a business, but then I always feel conflicted because I'm like, okay, it's a business, but then I do want to like practice yoga authentically. How am I going to practice yoga authentically if I'm going to sit here and spend like 5K on something? So
yeah.
it's a very gray area. It's not black and white.
It's it's in several things, not just with yoga, but even with like shamanism, like
Mm,
people take it as their own and go, oh, I'm going to charge $20,000 for people to learn something that is our God-given gift, and it's exploiting all these, all what is natural and um a way of life for those who've been doing it their whole life. They don't charge for this. This is something that they do. This is their church.
exactly. Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
then it's taken here in the Western world, and people are exploiting it. And so then we
Yeah.
get this certain idea of what yoga is. I remember being told, "Oh, Jen, you shouldn't practice yoga because it's the work of the devil." And I start laughing and I go, "Yeah, and I go to church and people are judging me for the color of my skin because I'm black."
Mhm.
And I go, "Isn't that the work of the devil?" For
Yeah.
judging me based on my color or hating me based on my color. So let's talk
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
Because you're making a judgmental call on something you don't understand and you fear. You're gonna say it's the work of the devil. Well, damn, there's a whole lot of things that are the work of the devil that you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I think this is something like, yeah, we need to talk about because I'm hearing from you from someone who's, pretty much grew up with it without even realizing the beauty of something nowadays is like, oh, that's being exploited to make all this money. And you're over here, no, it's kindness. And it's like, look at the two birds, and
Yeah.
like a simple way of life,
Yeah.
I think this is beautiful. And then here you're like, it doesn't need to be an hour. It doesn't need to be this huge format. But what does it feel in your body? How does it feel in your body?
Mm-hmm.
What are you feeling at this moment? Do you need to stretch or move your shoulders? This whole flow of it, so lots
Yeah.
of beauty that you shared today.
Yeah, thank you. And it's always interesting because it's such a different concept. Like people don't understand it and they're taught this is just the one kind of way of doing it. But like you're saying, like cultures are getting exploited, it's these teachings are getting so watered down. And I think when it comes to yogic spiritual teachings, it's very hard to translate it into English. Like there's this phrase that they have in the yoga practice called sthira sukha, which is effort and they say it's effort and ease, but it's just so much more than that. It's more of like seeing, because you could, there's an effort and ease. Yeah, you have to have a balance of effort and ease, but it's more of like, okay, how does your body feel? Yes, you need a little bit of effort, but you need to also bring some ease into it. And it's not just like this one-dimensional way of saying it, but I've heard it in like different yoga classes and it's so much more. It's a lived thing. Like you can talk about it. You can talk about yoga and all those philosophies, for like years and years, but that practitioner has to have that lived experience to really understand it.
Mhm.
So it's just like a lot of things are watered down and these bite-sized like micro yoga sessions, like in my opinion, like I feel it helps for people to understand like certain like for example the philosophy of Sukha. Like I feel like people will understand that more because they're like, okay, how does my body feel? Do I need to like have more effort? Do I need to ease back a little bit? So it's instead of just doing like the 160-minute practice and you're telling the class Sukha, effort ease, like in kind of having this spitting out philosophies for like related to that. It's just the micro sessions I've noticed helps a lot for people to understand those philosophies.
Mhm. I'm thinking, I go, Sarasuka, and here you're like, yeah, Sarasuka, while you're breathing and talking to a jackass, you know, coworker who's just not understanding. And it's like, okay, let me just release. There's that whole thing when, the deeper meaning of it, not just, okay, you're going to stretch and there's,
Yeah,
some ease
yeah,
into it, but
exactly.
even in everyday life. I
Hmm.
think that's the beauty of it is that deeper part of using it in as awareness of just everyday things. And if we were all to just practice this, how much kinder we would be to each other,
Hmm.
But
Really? Yeah. Yeah. And also I want another point. I know I'm bringing up so many points on my beliefs
yeah,
of
no,
yoga,
bring
but
it up.
I feel like it's a lot of like yoga is a popular thing to do. So a lot of people are like, I'm a yoga teacher, and it's more of like a society like status thing. Like I teach at the studio. I'm a yoga teacher. Like, and the reason I'm saying this, I used to be like that. Like I was like, I'm a yoga teacher. I used to like have that ego a little bit. And so and that's another reason why was so upset when I stopped teaching at the studio, because I'm like, oh my God, what are people gonna think? Like I'm a yoga teacher. And then like the more I was like doing more of my self-study, I'm like, why do I have that need to like be labeled a yoga teacher that teaches at a yoga studio? It's like it's no different from someone who's like not teaching at the studio or doing like something similar to that I am now. So it's like a lot of times it's just something that's like popular, like being a yoga teacher is popular. I remember I was in middle school and at the Y they had yoga. And so I went to this yoga class and it was like yoga for like middle schoolers or some around my age. And there's only like me and one other person in there. Like I feel like nowadays that room would be packed. But it's all about like, and I'm glad that yoga's getting popular. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think we have to just do our due diligence to like just recognize the cultural value of it and understand that it is important, but there are, it's getting so diluted to like, we need to do this hour yoga. And
Yeah.
that's like, that's the only way you can practice.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, because it's yoga is a way of life. It's not just an hour, 60 minutes on a mat. And
Yeah.
I think that's more of like this patriarchal upbringing here in the Western society where it's like, okay, check it off,
Yeah.
versus, and that's like with everything in life, right? Why you want to get married? Because that's what we
That's what
do.
we're supposed
Get
to
to a
do.
certain age,
Yeah.
get married, you go to college, you get married, you have children.
Yeah.
Why? Why do you? Because that's what we're taught. No, that's like a whole check off thing, right? You're checking off
Mhm.
these things, but versus why do you want to get married? And you're talking to someone who's been twice divorced, right? And I go, I don't care to get married anymore. I noticed that I could do that all by myself,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm in a different place in life too. And coming back to yoga, it's like honor who you are and where you are and listen to what your body's telling you. And I think a lot of us, and even in the education system, I'm going to put it out there. We don't teach children how to listen to their bodies. We tell them,
Mm.
don't do this, don't do that, but we don't have them sit with why and feel it in their body as to how come. And, usually when we see other children acting out in a negative way, there's something else going on in that child's home,
Hmm.
but they're unable to express it because they may not have the vocabulary for it, and they probably just who wants to sit with this negative energy, and so they're shaking it out and being aggressive, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
there's a lot of power in it, and in what you're sharing, it's not just yoga is not a checkoff mark, but there's even a deeper reason into yoga. It's a way of life. And
Yes.
for your culture, that's what you guys did. This is what was taught, and it's a slowing down, which is something we all need to come back to that essence of what it is. It's union
Hmm.
with ourselves, with one another, right?
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. I mean, you brought up a good point about listening to your body and not just numbing out on feelings. And I think that's something that as sometimes we're taught, like, oh, you shouldn't feel this way or you shouldn't feel that way. There's a reason why you're feeling that. And that's something that I'm trying to teach my son right now. Like, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to feel these things. They don't define you. That doesn't mean you're an angry person. That doesn't mean you're like always going to be happy. These are emotions. And, you know, you just deal with it in a healthy way and then you move on. And I think that's like, when you brought up that with like with the kids nowadays, I'm like, it's very sad. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. But imagine if we were able to honor what we're feeling at that
Yeah,
moment and be able to hold space for one another. That's even more powerful because we're going to go through stuff in life, and here you're
sure.
sharing how, oh, that experience with that coworker, and just doing the
Yeah.
mudras, like how there's this magic with our hands and doing all the things, it's like, ooh, really, and something, that right now that just kind of came to mind with, the mudras is with NLP, so neuro linguistic programming. And
Hmm.
there's certain things, there's certain exercises that they do to help with changing the behavior, where
Mm.
you put like these pressure parts, and probably it could be a mudra, or you touch a part where you don't usually touch as a reminder. You stamp a feeling you want to feel, and when you press on it, like if I were to touch mine, sometimes I get like this shock feeling because I put this happy energy at that place that I press.
Hmm.
And with the mudras, what you're telling, what you're sharing is there's this practice of, what is this one for again?
This is Yana Mudra, and usually you'll see people when like they're meditating, they'll have them on like their knees.
And what does this do? What does that have us?
So this is actually supposed to help just when you're meditating, for the concentration. I don't. there's so many mudras, so I don't
Yeah.
know the exact benefits, but a lot of times it is like just to sometimes people will focus on like, where their fingers are touching if they're like feeling fidgety or something. It's like there's so many reasons why we practice mudras. It's not only for like there are some benefits, some medical benefits, but sometimes it's like you're meditating and you want to focus on something else other than your body or like, just to feel more grounded.
That makes sense. So here you're doing this, right?
Yeah.
And to
Yeah.
focus. And so your hands are here and you know you're gonna focus. Where
Hmm.
like, in NLP, you can touch a certain spot like on your knuckles that you don't
Yeah.
always touch. And
Yeah.
put that as a button to be like, okay, I want to feel this way, or I'm feeling anxious, so I'm gonna touch here or behind the ear, somewhere that's not normally touched, because when you touch that part and you put that mood in,
Hmm.
you touch it and it's like, oh, okay, what? I don't need to have that feeling anymore. I can let it go and think of something happy. Whereas holding these mudras, it's putting you into a certain mental thought, right?
Yeah.
So here's this
Yeah.
practice. We don't even understand why we're doing it, but oh, they already know. There is definitely a science because
Yeah.
it's very sensitive. And when we touch those parts, it's like we learn to be in this mood. Like I'm going
Mhm.
to focus right here. I'm going to put my hand like this and focus. So this is all powerful. And like you said, it gets diluted because we don't really realize like the practice of it versus putting it in a to-do list,
Mhm.
checking it off, saying, okay, I did this each day. And then when you get to 100 days straight of yoga practice, like it's bragging rights. Okay, so
Yeah.
so you get to 100 days, how are you
Mhm.
feeling? I still see you flipping out and flipping me off. I'm like,
Yeah, yeah. And another thing I've been noticing is sometimes in culture, I've seen people post like, I've done like 3 classes in a row, I've done two. It's like, but why do you need to do the 3 classes? It's like, it's more of like, showing off on like Instagram and like for me personally, if I do a practice, like I don't even post it online. Like I used to post like poses and everything, but I just strayed away from that because then it's like I'm diluting what yoga is, and for me, I feel like I'm diluting it because people see the yoga practices, people see, oh, you're doing the fancy posture. I want to do that. I want to do yoga. And it's like, yeah, I guess that's a good way to like get the gateway. Like, okay, I want to do yoga for that. But then sometimes I feel like people just think of purely physical. Like, and the reason I'm saying this because I used to be like that. Like, I learned how to do a headstand, and like I was like, pictures with headstand. Let me do it in the snow. Let me do it like in this cool like background. I don't even do headstands anymore. Like, I don't do that. And doing a headstand, there are benefits, to doing a headstand, but it's like for me, I was doing it purely like for ego because I'm like, look at me. And I used to like show off in like, the yoga class and be like, okay, I'm doing a headstand. No one else. And it's like, I notice the patterns in my head. And so, like, I'm not saying everyone who does a headstand in class has that same like mindset, but it gets to a point where like it could start getting performative. Like, and you have to realize when it's getting performative. And I'm glad I stopped going to the studio when I did because I got to take a break and look back and be like, what is my yoga practice? Like, why am I practicing? Is this something I really want to do? Is there a different way I can practice? So I did a lot of self-study just to be like, what works for me?
this is so inspiring, and I appreciate you being so open and vulnerable about the ego, right? We all
Yeah.
get caught up in the ego. And I was like thinking, I go, well, still do share those poses because those are inspiring, but share the story behind it because I
Yeah.
love everything you're sharing. Like, yeah, here we could do a 15 minutes. Here's a 15-minute video. I love the short micro yoga session.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I want to focus on my lower back, and
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
15 minutes just, and I feel like, ooh, I'm a new woman. I go, that's so powerful versus trying to do an hour of stretching and holding it. I'm like, oh, why am I doing this? I missed the whole practice, right? I missed the whole
Yeah.
reason to do the yoga, which is to be one in my body. Instead, I'm like, oh, I don't like this, so
Like
I
I said, it's it's not for everyone, and it's okay if you practice. Like I do an hour session. It's so rare though, but I do. But it's like I just think we have to realize there's so many options than going to the studio, It's there's nothing wrong going to the studio. I'm not saying don't go to the studio and do your hour practice if that's what you enjoy, but a lot of people I've talked to don't go to the studio because of money and time, and they feel like they have to be this certain way. And I'm trying to like just highlight those points whenever I'm like talking like on a podcast or even in my content. Like my content may seem like I'm just jabbing at yoga studios, but I'm not. I'm just saying like how my opinion, and like it's a bold opinion. Not many people think it, and that's okay. But I'm just trying to like people to be like, okay, maybe if I think of it this way, let's see how this will be for me.
Yeah, no, I love it. Probably instead of saying, "Oh, don't do it at the studio," be like, "Look, you can do it in your office space.
Yeah.
I'm going to do some neck rolls and why the benefits, So I think what you're on to is just incredible and amazing. And I'm so thankful that you came on here to share these amazing qualities about yoga because it's inspiring me to go back to the mat or not even, or just be in my seat and just like, okay, I'm gonna hold a warrior pose. I'm gonna just hold it. I'm doing yoga right
So
now.
you're like pretty much doing chair yoga, I just have to show you how to do like the legs, and then you pretty much are in like warrior one or warrior two,
See, it's like, oh, I'm sitting down in the office. Let me stop and do some chair yoga.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
see? You're pretty much doing
Okay.
chair
Well, I don't
yoga.
know if I'm doing it right. I know warrior, one of the
Yeah.
warriors is like this or something, but yeah, I think this is so inspiring. And I hope those who are listening, this inspires you too, that it's safe and it's okay to do 15 minutes or 10 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, or just a minute. But it's just the awareness of the body, this is incredible. So we are at our close, and what I do love to
Yeah.
ask everyone who comes on, Sacred HERstory, to leave us a little last words. What is something, it could be something, what you wish you knew when you were younger, or
Mhm.
something that you'd like to share with the audience that would help them in their own becoming or
So,
remembering, I should
you
say.
know, yeah, this is so just in general, the one thing I do want to share is it's okay not to be liked by everyone, and it's something that I've just recently I'm coming to the that's okay. My parents immigrated from India, and so we were taught to assimilate in the culture, don't question things, like keep your head down. And there are so many times where like I wanted to speak up, I wanted to like, stand up for like what I believe in, and I kept quiet, and I regret those times. So the one thing I would say is like speak your truth, and the people, if you lose friends, if you lose people that like don't agree with you, then they're not meant to be in your life. When I started speaking out about the yoga studio, I had some people who didn't like that, which is fine. I'm not like offended, but I'm just saying like there are going to be people who don't like it when you speak your truth, and you're just going to feel so much more at peace when you speak your truth. Like I have found my core people, like I know my boundaries, but just don't think that you have to be liked by everyone. So that's something I've been learning. Like that's something I've been dealing with a lot recently. Just not not being like, oh, if I say this, is everyone gonna like me? Are people gonna argue with me in like the comments of my social media posts? So I have to just be like, I'm just gonna say my piece. That's all I'm gonna say, and whatever happens, happens.
I love it. Well, you're very liked here. So I love this.
Oh,
And
thank
I
you.
look more, I'm like, ooh, I so want to dive into your content. And do you have a website for,
Yes,
okay,
I do. It's, oh my gosh, I just changed it. So I think it's yogaforreallife.com. But like there's only one R, so it's FOREAL. So
okay.
yeah.
Where it's going to be in the description. So you can follow Namrata. And I was saying Namrata's name wrong. She finally corrected
Well,
me.
you said it perfectly. You said it beautifully. So no.
But prior to when we met,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I was so proud of myself. But anyways, we learn how we correct ourselves. But Namrata's information will be in the description below. And thank you for joining us. If her story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you that you're not walking this path alone, I invite you to follow and subscribe to Sacred Her Story podcast, and also follow and subscribe and reach out to Namrata to learn the simple tools of yoga and just working that in your everyday life. So here again, thank you for joining us for She is Sacred, her sacred, highly exalted rebel. It's saying yes to ourselves and trusting in our own inner wisdom. And thank you again, Namrata, for allowing us to celebrate your unique journey, your truth, your love. And girl, you're loved here. So
Thank you.